Hello all, Rick here with a cultural index. It's been a while, I know, but we are looking today at one of the most notorious alien species in the Star Wars galaxy, the HUTTS, also known as the Hutt clan or cartel. Biologically, the imposing bulk of a Hutt is obvious. They are large, even up to 4.5 meters in length, although typically around 3.5 to 4 meters in adult height. They weighed in excess of 500 pounds, 266 kilograms, and had 3 limbs, 2 short arms and a tail. Their slug-crossed lizard-like form often have them termed as gastropods, despite them having more traits in common with mammals. Their skin, although it did secrete a slimy layer, was very dense and tough. Under it were layers of blubber and muscle that gave them considerable protection and strength, although their weight rendered them very slow. Their skin tones ranged from dark to light shades of orange, tan, brown, purples and greens. They had a single skeletal structure in the form of a supporting spine, and internally they had 3 lungs. In Legends, the HUTTS were hermaphroditic and would change gender when rearing their young, although recent canon has retconned this so that the HUTTS are biologically dual-gendered. HUTTS are born as infants, less than a foot in length, known as HUTTlets, but they would continue to grow in girth and height as they aged, seemingly without limit, as older HUTTS could in fact become so heavy that they could not move anymore. Despite this, they had incredibly long lifespans, of up to 1,000 years. Jabba the Hutt, for example, was over 600 when he died, but in Legends, there are HUTTs recorded as being over 1,700. Because of their long lifespans, their rate of reproduction was rather slow, and HUTTlets were guarded by the families with zeal, as they were often targets for extortion and the like, and a Hutt younger than 200 was still considered a minor in their culture. They have incredibly strong resistances to toxins, and this may be due to their regenerative properties that allow them to grow back from substantial damage, even parts of their brain over decades or centuries. They could be force sensitive, but this seemed less so than even the rare rates present in other species. Their homeworld is Null Hutta, a terrestrial world of 12,150 kilometers and around 1G. Its primary habitat was moist. Humid, steamy marshland and pools of surface water shrouded the planet among thick vegetation and damp rock. It had frequent, greasy rains, and that sounds just lovely. The capital city was Bilbusa. It was a ringed planet and had several moons, one of the most prominent being Nar Shaddaa. The planet was located in S12 of the Outer Rim territories and the beginning of a region known as Hutt Space. Hutt Space also covered Toydaria and Doran systems, as well as Siricon, Kintan, Clantuin, Nimbun, Kes, Saki, Slaheron, Srilur, Vodran, Elysia, and it had control over several prominent trade routes too, making it a very active region. In Legends material, it was said that they came from a planet called Val originally, but that planet suffered a calamity which killed their sun gods, Ivona and Ardos, and stripped away its atmosphere. Some records suggest that a roaming black hole passed through the system, after they had become a spacefaring species, sometime prior to 25200 BBY. This devoured one sun and caused the other to shed its surface layers and burn off Val's atmosphere. After watching their gods die, the Hutts fled to a suitable colony world that became Null Hutta. To their logic, as their gods had perished, that meant that they were better than their gods because they survived. The Hutt cartel also maintained presences on other worlds, such as Tatooine, Dandaran and Teth. The Hutts maintained a large monopoly of criminal enterprises and factions, managed over by a balanced and internally regulated structure of families called the Kajadik. Representatives of these 5 ruling families made up the council, who managed their own code of conduct and punished their lawbreakers. Despite being a criminal empire, the Hutts did have and follow their own rule set. It's just that culturally, their morals and values were at odds with most other life forms, so galactic law considered many of their actions illicit. Generally, the Hutts were uncaring for the reputation this created for them, but were not ignorant of it. Equally, they would utilise the Hutt stereotype for advantage, but also acquiesce to galactic law in order to do business. Several times throughout their history, they have formed agreements with legitimate powers to stay in operation, perfectly aware of the notion that often such powers as the Empire or even the Republic would occasionally need access to the shadier side of nation building. In this way, the Hutt criminal empire was able to prosper for millennia, despite being completely open about its flouting of law. The Hutt Council also made up one of the voices of the 5 major syndicates that were the organised crime ring of the Outer Rim. Other powers that shared this honour were the Black Sun, Crimson Dawn, Cremora and Pike syndicates, although with the nature of their endeavours and politics, these would likely fluctuate with time. The Hutts utilised their control over their hyperspace lanes to full advantage and practiced slavery, smuggling and much black market trade. In Legends though, and somewhat supported by canon, they would rather create a situation of indentured servitude than open slavery when it came to their own affairs. This was done as slavery often led to less productivity and rebellion, while the meagre rewards and tenure provided by servitude was enough to keep a flicker of hope alive and therefore quieten dissent. It was probably on the backs of such slaves or servants that they built their empire in the first place, as examples of their architecture from worlds such as Jakku and Matau, although Hutt worlds, featured stairways and smaller doors amid the smooth open surfaces and ramps preferred by the Hutts. This displays a need for humanoids to ambulate around their worlds, and I doubt it was for sightseeing. Typical Hutt behaviour saw them indulge in a myriad of vices, from smoking hookah to spice, and eating copious amounts of food from all over, finding many easily digestible. Even other sentient species if they wanted to make a statement. They could be attracted to other species despite obvious differences, but not always in a sexual way. Often it was more of a twisted form of appreciation or desire for possession. A Hutt would collect people considered attractive and parade them around as a collector of coveted art would exhibit its gallery, for example, which I would argue is kind of, if not worse. Often they displayed many negative traits, such as selfishness, paranoia, and general malevolence in attitudes towards others outside of their own clan or families, which does raise an interesting question. Are they often criminals because these are inborn traits, or does being a criminal instill this mindset? Either way, Hutts hungered for power and control with an intense ambition. Psychologically, I do wonder if this was attached to their physical form, being less able, and therefore it was preferable to have control over those around you to work for you. In terms of beliefs, there seems to be a faith in some form of gods outside of legend mentions. The Hutt known as Bunta Hestilik Shadru won a lot of battles, expanded his control, and when he died, he is said to have ascended to godhood for his deeds. This ties in nicely with legends, as it suggests that after witnessing the death of their actual gods of myth, their first thought was, "So you're saying there's an opening?" Nevertheless, when a Hutt dies, they shroud their dead in wraps and buried them in tombs. They managed their own internal currency for use among the families, called the Pagat, that were forged from gold. The Hutt script and language is called HUTTS, and was easy to learn by humanoids. Their naming structure was interesting and made of 3 names, using Jabba the Hutt as an example. Disregarding titles, which you should probably not do if you're trying to get on a Hutt's good side, Jabba's full name was Jabba the Silgic Tiur, The first name is their known name, and the only one that most people know them by. Their middle name was called the Coivus, and it denotes what criminal family, the Kajidik, they were from. In Jabba's case it was the Dasilogic family, but there have also been the Hestiliac, Gnudu, and the Basadi. The last name is of secretive origin, as none outside of Hutt society know what it alludes to, and some suspect it's a title or honorific of some sort. The Hutt are commonly considered to be criminal by their very nature, and this is not entirely wrong. It seems that their morality and what they consider practical versus moral is just not on the same wavelength as many other species, leading them to easily form their organisations. However, out of pragmatism, many will cooperate with greater powers' laws to avoid complications, at least on the surface. But a Hutt is ambitious and craves power and control. It could be that this ambition is driven by fear. After all, the greater your influence, the less danger you may be in, at least to their minds. But of course, in such circles as the Hutt clans, the bigger you are, the harder you fall, so they are consistently trying to expand their operations, further building their defensive rings of sycophants, soldiers and servitude. They'll amass great hoards of treasure, not only of material value, but of social merit too, to display their power and remind those in their vicinity the boons of loyalty and the cost of betrayal. Thanks for watching this index on the Hutt cartel of Star Wars. And I thought about going for some other seemingly malevolent species of science fiction and science fantasy lore. I was thinking perhaps we could look at the spacefaring and dimensional hopping illithid mind flayers of Eldritch Dungeons and Dragons fame, or continue in the Star Wars theme with the pseudo-darkside sorceresses, Night Sisters, and their brothers. As usual, the votes will be over on the community tab section of YouTube, but feel free to leave suggestions below for other targets for scrutiny. Thanks again for watching. I've been Rick, and until the next video, Majirju. That's goodbye in Huttese, I think.